Welcome to the podcast, John. It's great to meet you and great to talk with you today.
Thanks. It's great to meet you too, Erica.
So we are here in Douglas County School District in Colorado, and just like all schools across America, we're jumping into e-learning, and we have dug really deeply into your resources. So I'm really excited to have you talk with us today so we can continue to offer some of those tips for our teachers. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your work and just how you're engaging with things today.
I teach at a university. I've been there for the last 5 years, on my 6th year here. Before that, I taught for 12 years at the middle school level. I was also an instructional technology coach during that. A big part of what I focus on currently in my university is sort of the intersection of student-centered learning, project-based learning, design thinking, that kind of stuff, and then technology. How do we make that work in different environments?
So, John, we've done book studies around some of your older books like Empower and Launch. I see that you have a new book out. Tell me a little bit about that as well.
It's built on the idea of building student ownership and self-direction in their learning. When the pandemic happened and we went into quarantine, a lot of teachers were feeling frustrated with students not showing up to virtual meetings or showing up but just turning everything off, right? Is that familiar? The black tiles across your screen, a lot of just circles with letters, students not turning in their work, not working collaboratively, the students themselves feeling kind of disconnected and lost. And a lot of the way it had been framed, the way people were talking about it was, how do we engage students online? Like what's going on with student engagement? I really think that the engagement question misses the bigger issue, which is it's not a problem of student engagement, it's a problem of student self-direction, right? And self-direction being sort of that overlap of being a self-starter and a self-manager. So in the book, I get into ways we can build ownership and self-direction. I include certain other things that I think are important. So there's a whole chapter on access and equity, which I think is really important that we build that into it.
Right.
Sometimes what seems like a lack of engagement is an injustice. There's a chapter that's all about the design elements and UX design and making sure that what you've designed is clear for students. But the main idea is, how do we help students own their learning when they're in virtual and hybrid spaces?
It's like you're reading my mind, John. We just had a conversation about the difference between engagement and student ownership and accountability, and whether or not we're confusing accountability and ownership and exactly what you talked about. So what strategies do you have that we could share with some of our teachers around, number one, engagement, because that still is part of it, but then, as you said, moving into real student ownership of the learning?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. One of my thoughts is to build ownership and student agency and autonomy into the classroom community. And that starts with how you set up your norms, how you set up your procedures, making sure that when you do those virtual meetings, there's an opportunity for student voice and choice. So doing a scavenger hunt, doing a show and tell activity, regardless of the age, really focusing on building that community, but building the community with a sense of buy-in from students, right? So they really feel like they're a part of it. So I think it begins there. I would say find those areas where you would like to build more ownership and start small. We're going to start adding some choice menus into what we're doing and some virtual choice menus. We're going to do a quick 2-day, 3-day, Wonder Day project. We're going to try building in student self-assessment. And then I think what it looks like in different areas varies as well. So building ownership and self-direction in, say, collaborative work is more about building interdependency and structure. What I do think we're seeing is we can't compete with distractions, right?
Right.
Distractions going on. And that trying to be heavy-handed on accountability and really focusing on those extrinsic measures just doesn't work, right? So how do we get kids excited? How do we get them to feel like they're a part of something? How do we get them, motivated, but also motivated in a way where they feel like they belong, but also there's a sense of control. They feel like they're in control a little bit.
That's actually a really good point. We've been talking a lot about community and the culture of your online classroom and how it's the same but different than a brick and mortar school. That's such a good point about being able to create belonging. That's much more challenging, I think, in an online environment. And then we've talked very much to teachers about thinking about what's within your control right now, but I think you bring up a really good point about bringing that to students as well. What other advice do you have about building community and just the culture of the online classroom?
There's a lot of power in small check-ins, right? A quick email, little things like that make a huge difference just so the students feel like they're known. It's what we do in person, right? In person, we walk around the class and we say, hey, what do you need help with? Oh, I'll get to work, like, or you ask them how they're doing as they walk into class. And there's a lot of power in just those little check-ins. My other thought would be, I really think being strategic about how we plan those synchronous virtual meetings is really important. What I'm realizing is that the way students are viewing synchronous and asynchronous, and it's a little unfair, but they're viewing synchronous as class time, they're viewing asynchronous as homework.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
That's not how we view it. That's not the way we want them to view it, but that's how they view it. So we have to really make the most out of those synchronous times. And what I'm seeing in high school, I'll just use his as an example. I could use any of my 3 kids. I see such a different learning experience for him in half of his classes versus the other half. So in half of his class, I won't say the subject areas, he pops on, he turns his mic to mute, he has his video off, and he listens to a 45-minute lecture. He is distracted, he's finding other things to do, he's a good student.
And that's no different than we would be, really.
Absolutely. And then I contrast that to, say, his robotics class, where he was able to come check out the robotics equipment, is playing around with it today on his asynchronous day because he's already finished his work and he's, it's 10 o'clock, but he's already done. And now he's jumping to the robotics project. He's excited about it. It's inquiry-based, it's project-based, it's hands-on. And tomorrow when he meets with his robotics class, he's going to be using the breakout rooms a lot. They use Zoom, but it could be Google, it could be using Jamboard. There's a lot of great tools. It's highly interactive. His mic is on the whole time, his video's on the whole time, and his teacher is keeping it interactive and hands-on, and they're doing in-the-moment strategy, and they're solving problems, and he's excited, and then he's bummed when class is over.
Right?
What a contrast between the 2 different experiences,
Oh my gosh, yes, yes. It's like I said, it's exactly what we would want for ourselves. So.
Absolutely. And, or I think of, his Spanish class, and he hates Spanish, and he says, I gotta take Spanish. He is loving that. You're watching him, there's movement, there's practice, there's meeting with the students in breakout rooms, but then also these small meetings with the teacher, and they're practicing it. The teachers encourage them, and in the past, Spanish teachers have really discouraged things like Duolingo, encouraged them to use Duolingo, and so he's practicing it on his phone, and now his phone, where he goes to unwind, isn't just memes on Instagram. There's this gamification element, and now I'm going to move up in Duolingo, and I love it. What a contrast between the classes there.
That's awesome. That's interesting to hear about, especially knowing your background and you have that insight into the classroom. So, John, I know that we have a limited time together and we could talk all day. I know that you have 100 strategies to share with us, but if we had one walk away today that we would share with our teachers about how to just navigate this new time or to connect with students, whatever it might be, what is the one walk away that you would offer today?
The first thing I would say is really have a mindset of experimentation, show yourself a lot of grace, and don't try to go too big at first, right? So that teacher that's just lecturing, figure out one way to make it more interactive. I'm going to do breakout rooms, or I'm going to have frequent rapid fire things in the chat that we can do, or I'm going to allow you to go do a scavenger hunt and come back and share what you found. Find something that's hands-on, that has some movement, that takes you away from the screen, or that's just interactive and lets you talk and interact with peers. And just choose that one small thing, and then next week choose another small thing, and slowly you go through these iterations, and by the end of the year you say, it's actually working pretty well. I've actually got this down.
That's great advice. I mean, start small. It doesn't have to be all day, all the time. So I think that's great advice. So I am really looking forward to your new book. As I said, I think you were reading our mind as we're talking about all of the things that are challenges for us right now. So I really appreciate your insight, and I appreciate you being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.